Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that I think a lot of us think we know, but if we're honest, we've probably got the polar opposite of the truth. We were talking about Epicurus.
Right.
And I have to say, looking at the prep material, I felt a little called out.
Called out? How do you mean?
Well, when I hear the word Epicurean, I get this very specific image in my head. I'm thinking, like a Friday night where I blow half my paycheck on some crazy tasting menu, maybe a bottle of Barolo, just pure indulgence. The magazine Epicure is all about high-end food. Epicurean delights means luxury.
Of course.
But then I open up the source material, and I'm reading about a guy who's living on bread and water in a garden somewhere, complaining about stomach aches. It just feels like a massive bait and switch.
It is probably the single greatest branding failure in the history of philosophy.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the most successful smear campaign. It really depends on how you look at it. Because if the real Epicurus, the actual man, walked into that Michelin star restaurant you're picturing, he wouldn't just be confused. I mean, he'd be horrified. He'd probably look at that tasting menu and see it as a recipe for misery.
Misery. That seems like a bit of a stretch. I mean, truffles are rarely miserable.
For him, they were. Or, to be more precise, the need for them was. The premise we have to start with is that Epicurus wasn't a party animal. He wasn't a foodie. He was a system builder. And his whole system, it wasn't designed to maximize fun in the way we think of it now. It was designed to cure a very specific disease.
And what's the disease?
Anxiety, fear, mental disturbance.
So he's not a chef, he's a therapist.
He's more like a trauma surgeon for the human soul. I mean, you have to put yourself in his shoes. This man lived in a time of absolute chaos. Alexander the Great dies, and his whole empire just shatters.
Right, the wars of the Diadochi.
Exactly. His generals are just fighting over the scraps. Cities are being razed. Political alliances shift overnight. The world felt dangerous and just completely random. So Epicurus looks at the human condition and he asks a really fundamental question. Why are we all so terrified all the time, and how do we make the pain stop?
That is a much heavier starting point than eat, drink, and be merry.
It's so much deeper. And to understand his answer, we have to treat his philosophy as a complete package. We can't just cherry-pick the pleasure part and ignore the rest. We have to look at his physics, his theory of knowledge, and his ethics as one giant interconnected machine.
And it's all designed for one purpose.
One purpose? To produce ataraxia. Tranquility, peace of mind.
So where are we getting all this from? What are the sources?
Well, we're pulling from a pretty wide stack today to piece this all together. We've got the biography by Diogenes Laertius, which is, where we get a lot of the juicy personal details.
He's always the guy with the gossip.
He is. Then we have some of Epicurus's own surviving letters. The letter to Menoetius, which is a summary of his ethics, and letters to Herodotus and Pythocles on physics. And then we have the big one. The massive epic poem by the Roman poet Lucretius called De Rerum Natura.
On the nature of things. And that's basically the Epicurean Bible, but written in verse.
That's a great way to put it. It's a 6-book epic poem that preserves the entire physical system. Honestly, without Lucretius, we'd have lost half of it. The Christian world did its best to erase him. So our mission today is to rebuild that system. We need to understand why a guy obsessed with atoms thought that was the key to being happy.
Okay, let's start with the man himself then. You mentioned the chaos of the time. Was he born right in the middle of it?
He was born directly into it, February 341 BC on the island of Samos. Now, his parents, Neocles and Charistrate, they were Athenians, but they were colonists, settlers.
Okay, so they weren't locals. That would have made them outsiders.
Exactly. And that sort of precarious status really defined his early life. Because when Epicurus was about 18, so basically college-aged, the politics shifted again. The native Samians, backed by a Macedonian general, kicked the Athenians out.
So his family became refugees.
Overnight. They had to flee to Colophon, which is on the coast of modern-day Turkey.
Wow. That's a rough start.
It is absolutely crucial context. If you ever wonder why Epicurus later preached live hidden and don't get involved in politics, you just have to look at his youth. He saw firsthand that political power is completely unstable. One day you're a citizen with a home, the next day you're a refugee with nothing.
It must have instilled a really deep craving for security.
A fortress, yeah. A place where the world couldn't hurt him.
So this refugee is looking for answers. Where does he go? Who did he learn from? Who were his teachers?
Well, the record says he studied under a Platonist named Pamphilus, and then later a man named Nausiphanes, who was a follower of Democritus.
And Democritus is the original atom guy?
He's the OG atomist, the guy who first proposed that the world is made of atomos. these tiny, uncuttable particles. Now, clearly, Epicurus learned a huge amount from these guys. His entire physics is basically a remix of Democritus. But here's where you get a little glimpse of his personality.
Well, yeah.
He hated admitting it. He absolutely refused to give them credit.
Wait, really? He wanted all the credit for himself.
He claimed to be self-taught. He publicly called Nausiphanes a mollusk.
A mollusk.
Yeah, basically calling him spineless. He said all his predecessors were just confused and that he discovered the truth all on his own.
So he sounds a little bit arrogant. Or maybe insecure.
It might have been a bit of both, but you could also see it as really smart branding. He was trying to set up a new school, a rival to Plato's famous academy and Aristotle's Lyceum.
And you can't just say, hey, I'm teaching the same stuff as those guys down the road.
Exactly. You need a unique selling proposition. So in 306 BC, he moves to Athens, the philosophical center of the world. And he does something really radical. He doesn't buy a grand public building or a gymnasium. He buys a house with a garden.
The famous garden.
The garden. And the location itself is symbolic. It was located just outside the city walls of Athens, sort of in between the Stoa, where the Stoics would later teach, and Plato's academy. And this physical location really matters. The academy was an institution. The Stoa was a public porch, the garden. It was a home.
It sounds much more like a commune than a university.
It was absolutely a commune. They lived there, they shared meals. Epicurus didn't believe in forcing people to give up all their private property. He actually thought that created resentment and distrust. But they essentially pooled their resources to support the community.
Right.
And the guest list for this commune was the biggest scandal in Athens.
It was allowed in.
That was the thing. Everyone. While Aristotle is over at the Lyceum teaching that women are biologically inferior and that some people are just natural-born slaves, Epicurus is opening his gate to women and slaves as full members of the school.
That must have ruffled a lot of feathers in polite society.
It was completely shocking. You had high-born women, like Themista, who was a student, but you also had courtesans, sex workers, living and studying as equals with the male philosophers.
But may.
Yes. We know some of their names. There's a woman named Leonikine who was apparently a brilliant writer and philosopher in her own right. She even wrote a treatise attacking Theophrastus, who was Aristotle's successor as the head of the Lyceum.
Hold on. A courtesan wrote a philosophical takedown of the most prominent Aristotelian of his day.
Yes. And the establishment, as you can imagine, hated it. Centuries later, you have the Roman orator Cicero still clutching his pearls about it, complaining that a little courtesan dared to criticize a great philosopher. But for Epicurus, the logic was simple. Does this person have a mind? Can they feel pain and anxiety?
And they need philosophy.
Then they need philosophy. It wasn't an intellectual social club. It was a hospital for the soul. And you don't turn away sick people because of their gender or their social status.
That metaphor of the hospital is really interesting because it implies that everyone outside the garden is, well, sick.
That's exactly how they saw it. To them, mainstream society is a madhouse. It's driven by ambition, fear, superstition, the pursuit of empty desires. The garden is the sanctuary. It's the sanatorium. And Epicurus was the head doctor.
But he wasn't alone, right? There was a core group.
He had a core group of guides, people like Metrodorus, Hermarchus, and Polyaenus. And by all accounts, they were an incredibly tight-knit group. They weren't just colleagues, they were best friends.
So did he practice what he preached right up to the end? I mean, it's one thing to be a chill, tranquil philosopher when you're healthy and life is good.
That is the ultimate test, isn't it? And Epicurus died in 270 BC at the age of 72. And he died the hard way. He developed a blockage of his urinary tract, almost certainly caused by kidney stones.
Oof. I've heard kidney stones described as pretty much the worst pain a human being can experience.
And you can add dysentery to that as well. So it was a slow, agonizing 2-week decline. But this is where the philosophy stops being abstract and gets tested in the real world. On what he knew was his last day, he wrote a letter to his friend Idomeneus. And a version of it survives.
What does he say? Get me some morphine.
He writes, and I'm paraphrasing here, "On this truly happy day of my life, as I am at the point of death, I write this to you. The disease in my bladder and stomach are pursuing their course, lacking nothing of their natural severity."
So he's not downplaying it. He's admitting the pain is maxed out.
He is. He's totally honest about the physical reality. But then he says, "But set against all this is the joy in my heart at the recollection of my conversations with you." And he ends the letter by asking Idomeneus to take care of the children of their friend Metrodorus, who had died earlier.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic for a second. Is that real, or is that just him trying to Look tough for the history books.
I'm in agony, but my brain is so powerful I don't feel it. It sounds a little bit like Stoic bravado.
It does sound like it, but the mechanism is actually very different. A Stoic might say something like, pain is not an evil. Epicurus says, no, pain is absolutely an evil. It's the worst thing. He's not denying the sensation at all.
So what's he doing?
He's engaging in a kind of mental balancing act. He believed the mind has a unique capacity that the body lacks. It can travel through time. His body was trapped in the painful present, right? But he was forcing his mind to dwell in the past, on the pleasant memories of friendship and philosophical conversation. He was literally using nostalgia as an analgesic.
So he's basically just distracting himself. It's more than distraction. He's counterbalancing. He's flooding the scales of his consciousness with positive mental data to outweigh the negative physical data. It's a learned technique. And whether it worked perfectly or not, the fact that he was coherent enough to be writing letters about caring for his friends' kids while dying of kidney failure, it suggests he wasn't completely consumed by self-pity.
It's an impressive exit. I'll definitely give him that.
Yeah.
But to get to that level of mental control, we have to dig into this system. And this is where the listener might get thrown off, because the system starts with physics.
Yes, the foundation.
Right. And if I go to a therapist today because I have anxiety and they start talking about protons and electrons and quantum mechanics, I'm walking out of that office. Why did Epicurus think you need to know about atoms to be happy?
Because he had a different diagnosis for the root cause of our anxiety. In the ancient world, the world was alive with invisible threats. If lightning struck a tree, it wasn't a discharge of static electricity.
It was Zeus. He was angry.
Exactly. If the earth shook, it was Poseidon in a rage. If you got sick, it was Apollo shooting plague arrows at you. You were constantly being watched, judged, and potentially punished by these volatile, invisible superpowers.
It's basically paranoia on a cosmic scale.
It is. And Epicurus realized that you can never, ever be truly tranquil if you think a capricious god might crush you at any moment for any reason. So he needed a way to kill the gods. Not literally, he thought gods existed, but to kill their involvement in the natural world. He needed a purely mechanical, purely naturalistic explanation for everything.
And to the atom.
Enter the atom. If lightning is just a certain kind of atom colliding in the clouds, then it's not a divine judgment, it's just weather. And if it's just weather, you don't have to be afraid of it. Physics is the antidote to superstition.
But didn't he have this weird rule about explanations? The principle of multiple explanations?
Ah, yes. This is the part that drives modern scientists completely crazy, but it makes perfect sense if you remember he's a therapist, not a physicist. He said that when you're looking at something distant and hard to verify, like the phases of the moon or an eclipse, if there are 3 or 4 plausible natural explanations, you should accept all of them as possibly true.
Wait, even if they contradict each other, like if one explanation is the moon is a ball of rock reflecting sunlight, and another is the moon is a bowl of fire that waxes and wanes.
Yes, exactly. Because from his perspective, he doesn't care which one is technically correct. He only cares that you accept that the cause is natural. As long as a god is doing it is not on your list of possibilities, you're safe. The goal isn't scientific precision. The goal is peace of mind. If you obsess over finding the one true cause, you just trade one anxiety, fear of gods for another, the anxiety of not knowing for sure.
That is pragmatism on steroids. It's like, I don't care how the toaster works, just convince me there isn't an angry ghost living inside it.
That is a perfect analogy. Precisely. Now, when it comes to the atoms themselves, he borrows the basics from Democritus. The universe is eternal, and it consists of only 2 things: matter, which is atoms, and void, which is empty space. The atoms are uncuttable, they're infinite in number, and they vary in shape, size, and weight.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward.
And he even had a theory of perception based on this. Vision, for example, happens because objects are constantly emitting these thin films of atoms, like a skin, that fly through the air and hit our eyes.
Like a constant stream of little pictures.
Right. But he adds a twist to the system that Democritus didn't have. And this twist is absolutely essential for his ethics. It might be the most brilliant and, frankly, weirdest part of his entire system.
You're talking about the swerve.
The Kleinomen, the unpredictable swerve.
Okay, explain this to me, because it sounds like a glitch in the matrix.
So Democritus's atomism had a huge problem, at least from Epicurus's point of view. Democritus said that atoms move by necessity. They fall through the void, they hit other atoms, they bounce off. It's a perfect, unbroken chain of cause and effect.
Which means everything is predetermined. Hard determinism.
Exactly. And if you knew the position and momentum of every single atom in the universe right now, you could theoretically predict the entire future with perfect accuracy.
And that means my choice to, say, pick up this water glass isn't really a choice. It was just the inevitable result of atoms banging into each other in my brain for billions of years.
Right. And Epicurus hated this idea. He famously said it would be better to believe in the myths of the gods than to be a slave to the destiny of the physicists. At least with the gods, you can try to pray to them or appease them. You can't pray to a mathematical equation. It removes all human agency.
So how does he break the equation? How does he escape this prison of determinism?
He introduces a tiny element of randomness into the fabric of reality. He says that as atoms fall downwards through the void, at no fixed time and in no fixed place, they will occasionally swerve. Just a tiny, tiny bit.
For no reason. Not because they were hit by another atom.
For no reason at all. It's an uncaused event. A random wobble.
Okay. Why? What did that get him?
It's a masterstroke because that one little wobble solves two massive problems for him. The first is a physics problem. It explains how atoms collide and clump together to create worlds in the first place. If they all just fell in perfectly straight parallel lines, they'd never interact.
Okay, that makes sense. But what's the second, more important problem it solves?
It creates a break in the chain of fate. It's the physical basis for free will.
Whoa. So he's trying to find a loophole for human freedom in the random motion of a single atom.
That's it. He argues that this random, uncaused motion in the atoms that make up our soul is the ultimate source of what he calls the free volition in living things. It's the reason we aren't just biological robots playing out a pre-written script.
That connects weirdly well to, like, modern quantum mechanics. The idea that at the most fundamental level of reality, it's all about probability, not certainty.
It's a stunningly modern intuition. He somehow understood that a perfectly ordered, perfectly predictable mechanical universe is actually a prison. You need a little bit of chaos, a little bit of unpredictability to have freedom.
Okay, so the universe is just atoms and void, they swerve around, and there are no angry gods watching me. I have to admit, I feel safer already. Yeah. But how do we know any of this is true? How do we know anything is true? He didn't like abstract logic games, did he?
No, he hated them. He thought Plato was completely lost in the clouds with his abstract forms. Epicurus was a hardcore empiricist. He believed that all knowledge, without exception, comes from the senses.
And this is his canon, his, ruler or standard for measuring truth.
Correct. The canon, or the standard of truth, has three parts. And the first one is the most important: sensation. He says that our sensations are always, always true. They are irrefutable.
Hold on a minute. That can't be right. If I have a high fever and I eat honey and it tastes bitter to me, my sense of taste is telling me this is bitter. But honey is sweet. Isn't my sense lying to me?
Epicurus would say, no. Your tongue is accurately reporting the physical interaction between the honey atoms and the atoms of your sick, feverish tongue. The raw report is true. The error only comes in with your opinion or your judgment. Your mind jumping to the conclusion the honey itself is bitter, rather than the more accurate conclusion, my tongue is messed up right now and this is how it's perceiving honey.
Okay, that's a very subtle but important distinction. He trusts the raw data from the sensor, but not the user's interpretation of that data.
Exactly. Don't shoot the messenger. The senses just deliver the mail. It's our minds that misread it.
All right, what's the second part of the canon?
The second part is prolepsis, which is usually translated as preconceptions or concepts. This is basically how we form general ideas and recognize things. You see a horse, then you see another horse, then another one. Your mind stacks up those repeated sense impressions to form a generic composite concept of horse.
It's pattern recognition.
It's exactly that. So that when I say the word horse to you, an image or concept immediately flashes in your mind. That's a prolepsis. It's a memory of past sensations.
And the third part?
The third part is the most critical one for our deep dive today. Feelings, or in Greek, pathy. And for Epicurus, there are only two of them that matter: pleasure and pain.
So this is the internal compass.
It's the only compass that matters for guiding our actions. He says nature has given every living creature two flags. Pleasure is the flag that says, pursue this, move towards this. Pain is the flag that says, avoid this, move away from this. You don't need a complex philosophical argument to know that putting your hand in a fire is bad. You feel it. It's immediate. It's non-negotiable.
And this leads us directly into the ethics, which is the part where we have to fix everyone's definition of hedonism.
Yes. The main event.
Because if pleasure is the ultimate guide, why isn't he telling us to, go do heroin? or eat cake for every meal.
Right.
Those things produce a lot of pleasure, for a while at least.
This is the absolute crux of the entire misunderstanding of Epicurus. He defines pleasure in a very specific and for us very counterintuitive way. We usually think of pleasure as what he called kinetic pleasure. That's active stimulation, the pleasure of eating, of drinking, of sex, of scratching an itch.
The dopamine hit, the feeling of satisfying a craving.
Exactly. But Epicurus points out that this kind of kinetic pleasure is almost always just the process of removing a pain or filling a lack. You only enjoy the act of eating if you are hungry. Hunger is a state of pain, a deficiency. Eating is simply the process of removing that pain.
So what happens once the pain is gone? Once you're not hungry anymore?
That is the goal. He calls that state katastematic pleasure. It's static pleasure, or the pleasure of being in a stable state. It's the state of satiety. If you are not hungry, not thirsty, not cold, and not afraid, you have reached the summit of all possible happiness.
That sounds, I don't know, kind of boring. To a modern ear, not being in pain doesn't sound like happiness. It just sounds neutral, like zero.
And that, Epicurus would say, is exactly why we are all so miserable. We don't recognize that neutral state of non-disturbance as the peak. We think we need to constantly add more stimulation, more excitement to be happy. But he argues you can't get fuller than full. If you keep eating after you're already full, you don't get more pleasure. You just get indigestion, you get pain.
So his hedonism is actually a philosophy of limits, of knowing when to stop.
It is a philosophy of subtraction, not addition. Happiness isn't about getting everything you want. It's about getting rid of the things that hurt you. The ultimate goal is a twofold state. Aponia, the absence of physical pain, and ataraxia, the absence of mental anxiety or disturbance. Once you have those two things, you are, in his words, living like a god.
But we're human. We're hardwired to want stuff. We have all these desires pulling us in different directions. How do we just turn that off?
You don't turn it off. You manage it. You have to become a ruthless auditor of your own desires. He gives us a brilliant framework for this, breaking them down into 3 distinct categories. It's often called the calculus of desire.
All right, walk us through the spreadsheet. What's the first category?
Class 1, natural and necessary desires. These are the non-negotiables. They're rooted in our biology. Food, water, shelter, basic clothing, and interestingly, friendship.
He puts friendship in the necessary category, like on the same level as food and water.
For him, yes. It's absolutely essential for a happy and secure life. We'll definitely get back to that. But basically, if you don't have these class 1 things, you either die or suffer immensely. So the rule is you must satisfy these. But luckily, he says, nature makes them very easy to get. Water is free. A bowl of oatmeal is cheap. A roof over your head doesn't have to be a palace.
Okay, that makes sense. What's class 2?
Class 2, natural but not necessary desires. This is where variation and luxury come in. You need water to live, that's class 1. But you might want a glass of fine wine, that's class 2. You need basic food for sustenance, class 1. But you might want a gourmet steak dinner, class 2. Sex also falls into this category.
It's natural, but you won't die without it.
Exactly. And what's the rule for this class?
Don't get hooked.
That's the perfect way to put it. The rule is, enjoy these things if they happen to come your way easily and without effort, but do not become dependent on them. If a friend offers you a glass of that expensive wine, by all means, drink it and enjoy it. But if it's not there, you must be perfectly happy and content with your cup of water. The danger is attachment. The moment you feel you need the wine to enjoy the dinner, you've lost your freedom. You are now vulnerable to fortune.
That's the classic hedonic treadmill, right? Once you get used to the luxury, you can't go back to the simple stuff, and your baseline for happiness just keeps getting higher and more expensive.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He wants you to keep your baseline for pleasure as low as possible. That way, a simple piece of bread and a pot of cheese can feel like an absolute feast. You become very difficult to make unhappy.
What about the final category, class 3?
Class 3, unnatural and unnecessary desires. He also calls these vain and empty desires. And this is the category that includes most of what our society tells us to chase. Fame, political power, vast wealth, statues in your honor, immortality.
So the life goals of basically every influencer, politician, and billionaire on the planet.
He would say, cut these out of your life entirely. Suppress them completely. They are poison.
Why? What's so uniquely bad about them?
Because unlike the natural desires, they are limitless. You can eat until you are full. You can drink until you are no longer thirsty. There is a natural stopping point. But you can't get full of power. There is always someone with more. You can't get full of fame. You are constantly worried about losing it or being replaced. These desires are bottomless pits that are designed to generate infinite anxiety.
So the only winning move is not to play. Opt out of the rat race completely.
A complete and total withdrawal. This is the source of his famous advice, lie hidden.
That's a radical prescription. It's basically telling 90% of modern society that their core life goals are a form of mental illness.
It is. He's looking at everyone scrambling to climb the ladder, and he's saying, you are running a race you can't possibly win for a prize that won't make you happy, even if you get it. The only sane thing to do is to stop running.
So we have the diagnosis in the general treatment plan, which is this audit of desires. But he actually had a more specific, memorable prescription, right? The 4-part cure, the tetrapharmakos.
Yes, the 4-fold remedy. This was a simple 4-line summary of the core therapeutic doctrines. It was something that Epicureans would memorize, like a mantra or a prayer to use when they felt panic or anxiety setting in.
Let's go through the 4 doses. Dose number 1, don't fear God.
We touched on this with the physics. The gods exist, but their nature is to be blessed and immortal, to be perfect. And if you're a perfect being, you don't have needs or wants. If you don't have needs, you don't get angry or jealous. Anger is a sign of weakness, of being affected by others. So the gods are in a state of perfect bliss and are completely indifferent to human affairs. They are just chillin' in the metacosmia, the quiet spaces between the different worlds.
It's the divine indifference. They aren't malevolent. They just don't care about us.
Which is the best news ever. It means you can stop worrying about angering them. You can stop with the elaborate sacrifices. You're off the hook.
Okay, that's a relief. What's dose number 2? Don't worry about death.
This is probably the hardest pill for most people to swallow. His argument is deceptively simple, and it's a direct consequence of his materialism. He says, death is nothing to us. For all good and evil consists in sensation, but death is the deprivation of all sensation.
Right, this is the famous line, when I am, death is not. When death is, I am not.
Exactly. You, the conscious feeling subject, will never actually meet death. It is literally impossible for you to experience the state of being dead.
I get the logic. It's a clean syllogism. It makes perfect sense on paper, but I just don't buy it as a complete cure for the fear. I'm not necessarily afraid of the experience of being dead, the darkness. I'm afraid of the loss, the FOMO. I'm afraid of not seeing my kids grow up, of missing out on the future. Cold logic doesn't seem to fix that emotional reality.
That's a very fair and common pushback. And Epicurus, or maybe more accurately, Lucretius, has an answer for that. He would say that fear is based on a false projection. You are imagining a ghostly you hovering over your own grave, feeling sad about all the parties you're missing. But there is no you left to miss anything.
So how do you convince yourself of that?
He uses what's sometimes called the symmetry argument or the mirror of time argument. Lucretius does this beautifully in his poem. He says, look at the infinite abyss of time that existed before you were born. The Punic Wars, the building of the pyramids, the Trojan War. Did you suffer because you missed them? Were you in pain?
No, of course not. I didn't exist.
And nature, he says, holds up that past eternity as a mirror to the future eternity that will come after you die. It will be exactly the same. A peaceful, sensationless non-existence. If the prenatal abyss doesn't scare you, then the postmortem abyss shouldn't either. They are identical.
That is chillingly comforting in a strange way. But it demands you really truly accept materialism. If you have even 1% doubt, if you think maybe there is a hell or some kind of judgment, the whole system breaks down.
That's why the physics is the absolute foundation. You have to be 100% convinced that your soul is just a temporary arrangement of atoms that will disperse at death. If you have any doubt, the fear comes creeping back in.
Okay, moving on to the more cheerful doses. Dose 3. What is good is easy to get.
This refers directly back to the calculus of desire. The good he's talking about is the satisfaction of our class 1 natural and necessary desires. Simple food, clean water, basic shelter, good company. Nature, he says, is kind. It doesn't make the things we absolutely need for happiness rare or expensive. We are the ones who make happiness difficult by convincing ourselves we need the rare, expensive class 2 and class 3 stuff.
And finally, dose 4. What is terrible is easy to endure.
This one, I'll admit, can feel like a bit of gaslighting, especially when you consider how he died.
Oh, don't worry, those kidney stones are easy to endure, says who?
His argument here is about the relationship between duration and intensity, he claims. If a pain is extremely intense, it is usually short, because it either passes or it kills you. If a pain is chronic and long-lasting, it is usually of a milder, more manageable intensity.
I feel like there is a very large middle ground of long, agonizing, but not fatal, that he's maybe ignoring there.
Perhaps. But the deeper point, I think, is about mental resilience. He's not saying the pain isn't real. He's saying that even in the midst of chronic pain, the mind has the ability to retreat into the pleasant garden of memory, or to focus on the anticipation of future pain-free moments. You are not reducible to your pain. You have a sanctuary inside your own head. It's a call to cultivate that mental toughness.
So we've fixed the internal self, we've got our 4-part cure, but we still have to live in the world and deal with other people. We mentioned he was strongly anti-politics.
Vehemently. Live in obscurity. For him, a political life is the opposite of a tranquil life. It brings envy, competition, danger, and it's entirely focused on the pursuit of those toxic Class 3 desires for fame and power. It's a guaranteed recipe for anxiety.
But if everyone follows that advice, if all the wise and good people retreat to their gardens, who builds the roads? Who defends the city from invasion? It seems like a fundamentally parasitic philosophy. It relies on other, less enlightened people doing the dirty work of running the state so the Epicureans can be safe and tranquil.
That is the classic and probably the most powerful criticism of Epicurean social theory. It's a free rider problem. And Epicurus would probably just shrug his shoulders and say, let the fools who are addicted to power and glory run the city. We will obey the laws to ensure our own safety, but we will not be the ones writing them. His goal isn't to create the perfect state. It's to create a perfect life for the individual within whatever state exists.
Speaking of laws, he had a very modern, almost revolutionary take on justice.
Oh, this is huge. Before Epicurus, justice was usually seen as something divine, or something written into the fabric of nature, a cosmic law, Epicurus said. No, justice is nothing more than a social contract. It's a pledge, a mutual agreement, neither to harm nor be harmed. It's a deal we make because it's useful.
So killing someone isn't wrong in some absolute cosmic sense. It's just bad for business because it makes society less stable and secure.
It's bad for my personal tranquility. If I go around harming you, I have to live in constant fear that you or your friends will come after me. That's a state of anxiety. So purely out of enlightened self-interest, I agree not to harm you, and you agree not to harm me, so that we can both live without fear.
It's self-interest masquerading as morality.
Or you could see it as a realistic and durable foundation for morality that doesn't require us to believe in any superstitions.
But he does have one massive exception to this cool, calculating self-interest rule: friendship.
Friendship, or philia, is the crown jewel of the Epicurean life. He valued it above almost everything else. He has this amazing line, of all the things which wisdom provides to make us entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship.
But isn't friendship incredibly risky from an Epicurean perspective? It's a profound attachment. If my best friend gets sick or dies, I'm going to be in immense pain. Doesn't that violate the primary rule of avoiding pain and disturbance?
It's the great paradox at the heart of the philosophy, and he admits that friendship probably starts out for reasons of utility, for mutual defense and security. I need you to have my back. But he says it ripens into something much more, a state where we come to love the friend for their own sake, not just for what they do for us. And the immense security and joy that a network of true friends provides far, far outweighs the potential risk of pain from loss. The garden wasn't a collection of isolated hermits. It was a chosen family, a network of love.
I want to talk about that letter you mentioned in the prep, the one that was found on a wall written to his mother.
Oh, this is just a lovely little fragment. It was found inscribed on that massive wall in Enoanda that we'll talk about. It's a letter Epicurus wrote to his mother, who was apparently having bad dreams and worrying about him. And he writes to her to say, basically, Mother, don't worry. I'm living well and happily. Your bad dreams are just atoms moving in your mind. I am safe and well. It shows this incredibly tender human side that completely contradicts the caricature of him as some cold, detached calculator. He loved his mom and wanted to ease her anxiety.
Let's pivot to the legacy now, because the story of how this philosophy survived at all is just, it's insane. We almost lost everything.
We very nearly did. For centuries after his death, Epicureanism was a huge and popular philosophical movement across the Greek and Roman world. But then the Christians took over the Roman Empire, and if you think about it, Epicureanism is the ultimate anti-Christianity.
No immortal soul, no divine providence, no afterlife, and pleasure, not faith, is the goal of life.
It's public enemy number one. The early church fathers, like Justin Martyr and Augustine, They went on the attack. They systematically dismantled it. They created the Epicurean pig caricature, claiming they were all just gluttons and atheists who lived in debauchery. They burned the books. By the Middle Ages, Epicurus was literally in Dante's Inferno, buried in a flaming coffin for the crime of being a heretic who denied the soul's immortality.
So if all the books were burned, how do we know anything about him today?
2 absolute miracles and a couple of other lucky breaks. The first miracle is Lucretius. A single forgotten manuscript of his poem, De Rerum Natura, was found in a German monastery in 1417 by a Renaissance book hunter named Poggio Bracciolini. That one book, rediscovered, brought the atoms and the swerve back to Europe. It was a bombshell.
And the second miracle?
The second miracle is the Villa of the Papyri. This story is straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. In the Roman town of Herculaneum, there was a huge, luxurious seaside villa. It was likely owned by the father-in-law of Julius Caesar, a man named Piso, who was a patron of an Epicurean philosopher named Philodemus. And this villa had a massive library filled with Epicurean texts.
And the Mount Vesuvius erupted.
79 AD. The pyroclastic flow from the volcano buried the entire town instantly. In the villa's library, it carbonized the papyrus scrolls. They were flash-cooked into what looked like lumps of charcoal. When explorers first found them in the 1700s, they thought they were just burnt logs. They literally threw some of them away.
Oh no, that's painful to hear.
It is, but then someone realized they were books. For centuries, we couldn't read them because if you tried to unroll them, they would just crumble into dust. But today, using advanced technology like multispectral imaging and CT scans, we are virtually unwrapping them layer by layer without physically touching them. We're recovering lost Epicurean texts right now as we speak. It's a time capsule from the garden.
That is absolutely incredible. We are literally downloading the mind of this ancient philosopher from a piece of 2,000-year-old charcoal.
And it's completely changing our understanding of the school. It shows us they weren't just navel-gazers. They were sophisticated thinkers, writing detailed treatises on poetry, music, rhetoric, even anger management.
And we can't forget the giant wall. You mentioned Ottawanda.
Diogenes of Aenoranda. This is one of my favorite stories in all of philosophy. Imagine a rich Roman citizen in the 2nd century AD living in a small town in what is now Turkey. He's an old man, and he decides, I want to save my town and all future generations from anxiety. So what does he do? He commissions a massive limestone wall. It was something like 80 meters long and 3 meters high, and he has the entire philosophy of Epicurus inscribed on it in huge letters for everyone to read.
A billboard for tranquility.
Exactly. He wrote a preface on the wall that says, I have set this up not for myself, but for the salvation of all. It's an incredible monument to philosophical humanism.
So the ideas survived against all odds. They trickled down through people like Pierre Gassendi, who kind of cleaned them up and made them acceptable for the church. And then they hit the big time with, of all things, the American Revolution.
Thomas Jefferson. This is the connection that blows people's minds. Jefferson was a devoted, though private, Epicurean. He owned multiple editions of Lucretius. In his letters, he wrote explicitly, I too am an Epicurean.
So when he wrote in the Declaration of Independence about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness,
he wasn't talking about the pursuit of property, which was the standard phrasing at the time. He was almost certainly talking about the pursuit of ataraxia, the fundamental human right to live a life free from physical pain and mental turmoil, free from the tyranny of kings and priests. The American dream has Epicurean DNA woven right into it.
And it doesn't stop there. Marx, too.
Karl Marx wrote his entire PhD thesis on the difference between the physics of Democritus and Epicurus. He absolutely loved the swerve. For Marx, the atom that randomly swerves, that refuses to just follow the deterministic path, was a metaphor for human freedom and resistance. For Marx, Epicurus was the first great rebel against the crushing deterministic machine of fate.
Wow. From a quiet garden in Athens to the Declaration of Independence to the Communist Manifesto, that is some serious range.
It really shows that the core system he built addresses something universal and timeless. The fear of being controlled and the deep, deep desire for individual freedom and peace of mind.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone pretty deep today. We've debunked the foodie myth. We've rebuilt the universe out of atoms and void. We've neutralized the gods. We've tried to face death without fear.
We've done the work.
If the listener wants to apply this today, not the atomic physics maybe, but the therapy, what's the single biggest takeaway?
I think it's the power of subtraction. We live in an economy, an attention economy, that is designed from the ground up to manufacture and sell you class 3 desires. You need this new phone. You need this vacation. You need this social status. You need to look this way. Epicurus is that quiet but firm voice in the back of your head saying, no, you don't.
So just check your desires constantly.
Ask yourself that one simple question before you chase after something. Is this natural and necessary? Is this something I actually need for my well-being? Or is this just empty calories for my soul? Because if you can genuinely find happiness with a bowl of soup, a good book, and conversation with a friend, you are invincible. The world can't really take that away from you.
And for me, I'm still stuck on the swerve.
The Kleineman.
That tiny random wobble. The idea that a perfect, flawless, predictable system is a prison, and that the flaw, the glitch, the little bit of chaos, that's where all the freedom is.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? We are free because the universe itself is just a little bit broken.
I think I'm going to go cancel my expensive dinner reservations and just call a friend instead.
A very wise choice.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the garden.